My name is Gerard, and I'm one of the owners of Filipo Marc Winery. My wife Tress and I took over ownership of the winery in February of 2004, and we'll actually be celebrating our 7th anniversary in just about a week. And we are Macomb County and Macomb Township residents, and it's just been a great run for us. We are what's called a winery on premise, which means that the wine is made on location. We are not a vineyard-based winery, but we do get grapes shipped in from all over the world, and they send it to us in these packages, these plastic sealed bags with the crush of the grape, and it gets shipped in from all over the world. We deal with brokers and distributors, and we have almost 83 wines to choose from. And today we're going to be making a brand new wine selection for you. It's a combination of the Pinot Noir grape and the Riesling grape, and this is going to be actually a blush colored wine. So the main ingredients that are going to go into here is the aged water, the crush of the grape. Another ingredient, it's called bentonite. It's actually a clay, and it's been processed and dried, and what this does is it'll chemically bond to all the residues that are naturally in the crush of the grape, bonds to it, makes it heavy, and with gravity it will drag to the bottom of the tank, so it's a natural form of clearing the wine even without filtration equipment. The other ingredient is one of the big ones. This is the yeast. Now, yeast naturally occurs on the outside of skin of grapes, but in this case, since the grapes have already been crushed, we don't have the skins available, so we have to add it externally. And what does yeast do? It loves sugar. It'll find the natural sugars that are in the crush of the grape, absorbs it, and then there's 3 natural byproducts. Ethanol, which is alcohol, carbon dioxide, which is a gas, and heat, because it is a chemical reaction. As we blend the wine, and the final thing we'll do is sprinkle the yeast onto the top of it, in the next few days it will find it, and it's actually going to raise like bread dough in the first few days, smell wonderful of course, and then it'll start to break down and go into what is called very active fermentation. That's where it's actually bubbling and fizzing, and it can actually heat up to almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There's one more component that's going into the making of our wine, and since we're not using oak barrels, we're using stainless steel, which is the preferred media to make wine in now. We get oak, and we use California red oak and French oak, and what they do is they cut the trees and then they chip it like in barbecue. You'll use a mesquite chip, and we're going to actually float this right into the wine. And the reason we use this is because there's a component in the skin of grape called tannin. It's a form of acid, and it's very necessary to get that specific type of flavor experience that you want in a red wine. Well, in order to enhance it, since we're not using oak barrels, we have to duplicate it by using this. So we're going to also add this to the mix of the wine to get that same experience. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blend the bentonite with a little bit of the aged water. It doesn't take a lot, but it clings quite a bit. So we're just going to blend the bentonite right in this. Now, it's very necessary that we blend it thoroughly, otherwise it's not really going to do what it needs to do to help finish the chemical process. So we're just going to pour this into the water, and then we're going to rinse it one more time just with some fresh water, just to make sure that we get all of that bentonite into the mixture. I'm just going to stir this bentonite in the water just to blend it just a little bit more before we add the crush of the grape. So like I said, we don't use sulfite in the production of our wine by choice, so we do give something up. The shelf life, average shelf life of your wines that are non-sulfited is about 4 years. But our wines are very reasonably priced, to the point where people are coming to buy our wines to take home and enjoy rather than, collect or hold on to for a long period of time. And as you can see, if you look up here, you can still see some of this residues, and that is skin and pulp from the grape, so it's a very rich mixture. It's not just a juice. We just cut the bags. Now these are hermetically sealed, airtight, so that you can actually ship this from all parts of the world and it stays stable, but it doesn't require refrigeration, and it has about a 1-year shelf life. So we're fortunate enough that we don't have to wait for the harvest in order to make wine. We can make wine any time of year, so we can make in short run, but as you can see here, we're continuously making wine all year long. We're going to go back and we're going to stir this up once again just to make sure we get a really good mix. Now last year we made about 30,000 bottles of wine, just to give you a little perspective. We're still considered what's called a small winemaker. The line in the sand between small winemaker production and large-scale production is 50,000 wine gallons. They don't go by bottles. Everything is measured in the wine gallon. And there's roughly about 5 bottles to a wine gallon. And that's why it's called a fifth. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to employ what is called a wine thief. That's this item here. It was used during, actually all the way back to King Arthur's days, and when somebody was going to steal a little of the king's wine, normally the tap was on the end and it was locked, but there would be a little cork on the top of the tank, and somebody that wanted to enjoy some wine, they would stick a thief down in there and they'd put their thumb on top and they'd lift it up and they could get some wine and put it into the glass. Well, it kind of works the same way, only it's a little more scientific. There's a little finger on the bottom. When we push it in, it opens up the inside and it will fill up with wine as deep as I put it into the wine. Now, in order to test this, and this is the initial reading that we're going to get, we use a thing called a hydrometer. It's also used to do beer making and other types of alcoholic beverages. We're going to drop it into the wine and we're going to let it float. Now, it's kind of like an upside down thermometer. Each one of these little gradations is 2 degrees, and in this case we've got a reading here of 1.084. The term is called specific gravity. It's a fancy term which basically means sugar content, and that's the initial reading that we get when we make the wine. Over a period of the next few weeks we will be excuse me, taking these measurements, and we'll be monitoring its progression merely by the amount of specific gravity changes, and that will tell us what the alcohol will be at any given time and how it is progressing. Now, the next thing that we're going to put in is that little bag of oak. I want this in first, and I'm actually going to drop it inside, and then I'm going to hold it down with the stainless steel paddle, just so it saturates a little bit. It'll actually take about 2.5 weeks for it to completely saturate to the point where it will stay down in the wine, but that's okay because it's still going to work sort of like a tea bag effect, and it will leach some of that acid, the tannin from the wood, into the wine. Okay, and then I'm going to let it go. The final ingredient is the yeast. Okay, just regular yeast that you might make bread out of. It's not extra special for wine. And we just sprinkle it right into the wine. And you can already see it sort of breaking down the foam, and it almost immediately is seeking out the natural sugar that is in the grape. Now, this is actually white Merlot, so this is going to be a blush wine, not a red wine, but all of that activity that you see in the wine, that is the carbon dioxide that's emitted from the yeast finding the sugar, and then the byproduct is carbon dioxide. It's also starting to form the alcohol right now, and it literally moves around all by itself like a living organism. And that's how we make our wine.